I think what's important to talk about for people is one, communication is difficult for everybody. It's even more difficult in a marriage sometimes because you spend so much time together, you live your lives together, you got to, discuss everything from children, money, where to live. And then you add on top of that a chronic illness, and then I think the research we've shown says that divorce rate goes up to about 75% with
Yeah,
chronic illness added.
big number.
And so I think it's important to talk about how to communicate or how to set expectations with each other or how to kind of find a way to move through life together, especially with a chronic illness that's manifests in different ways at different times.
Yeah, definitely. I think the inconsistency too of day to day really sets people up where without clear communication, there's like a lot of opportunity for a breakdown and a failure in a marriage.
So when people are married and have chronic illness, the divorce rates go up to about 75%.
Yeah, it does.
And it's already a high divorce rate, but then you add any sort of, POTS or some sort of PTSD or what, the divorce rate goes up a considerable amount.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the only ways to head that off is like really clear, intentional, effective communication over and over and over because POTS has different symptoms at different times depending on what's going on
Yeah, absolutely. And even within the same day,
within the
things
same
can
day.
change. And I think if you don't have that open line where it's like, hey, this is where I'm at right now, I can see that you're needing something else, but like, this is where I am. It creates an opportunity to be like, hey, let me change my expectations of what's going on.
But I think it's important for the person with POTS to be really honest because, like, for example, just the other day, you showed me that video of you were doing, what were you doing? A handstand?
Oh, I was doing a lever on the parallettes at the
A
gym.
lever on the parallel. And then we
Yeah.
went on a bike ride and I wanted to ride down this like ravine and go up a hill and you
Yeah,
got pissed off
I did.
because you were going to have to push your bike.
Yep.
And in my mind, like, well, you just did a lever.
Right.
So why won't you push the bike?
Yeah. But I'm not explaining that, like, hey, my coat hanger pain, if I'm pushing in front of me with a heavier weight outside of my body weight, that it creates neck tension, that, like, I'm on a tightrope right now and I don't want to get hurt.
Yeah. And then in my mind, like, we just have to do what you want to do, how you want to do it because you have POTS.
Yeah.
And I'm like frustrated by it.
But in the past, too, that is something that I definitely did was like, it creates a situation where everything is so fragile. So, like, if I do this, am I going to get hurt? If I do this, am I going to not feel good? And so I think I ended up being afraid of ever crossing that. And so I limited myself a lot and it got controlling.
Well, yeah, so that's the bad side, but then you've done all this work to get better, to get, more fit, and you're going to the gym, you're in remission. Is that what I
Yeah.
mean? Is that how you say it? But then there's still that's where it still gets tricky, right? Because it's
Right.
like, oh, you're good now,
Right.
and that's not true.
Yeah. It's like I'm good, but I'm good within the bounds of what I need to do to stay good,
Right.
which, POTS doesn't go away. It's not just gonna POTS isn't just gonna go away, but I can do things that make me feel amazing and be able to live a really normal life, but I still have to, especially with having hypermobility. And I think that's what I've learned is the hypermobility is kind of where I get hemmed up and end up getting hurt.
Well, what do you mean by that? Like, okay, so you hypermobility, you kind of twist something, pinch something,
Yeah.
and you go into like your muscle spasm or what do you
Yeah,
mean?
so like nerve, so like I got a pinched nerve and like my fingers were numb for like a week
Yeah.
because of pushing too hard. Or, I get like really bad neck tension and then I can't work out as much as I need to. And then would start not feeling good.
Right.
So it's like this balance of being able to like keep moving forward while not getting set back.
Yeah, so like in my mind, where it's frustrating for me is that you kind of have to set the pace with
Yeah.
what we do together.
And I don't actually want to.
Right, but like I can get annoyed by that or I can be flexible with that as long as the expectation is clear that I need to know going into it that you're going to have different responses to different activities.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't even know what those are.
No. No, in the beginning I didn't at all. So I just got hurt because like
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, I can physically do this."
Yeah.
But just because I could physically do it doesn't mean I could suspensory like my ligaments could handle it, or my joints could handle it, or my cardio, could handle it. And so that's been a balance, is figuring that out too.
And so then if you don't even know half the time and then you can't communicate it,
Yep,
and then I'm just thinking about my own frustrations,
totally.
that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and I mean, in the past it has been where like I'll be getting frustrated because I don't want to let you down. And so I'm pushing harder than I know that I should. Or like, say years ago, like when we were running or something and I would red line and I wouldn't say anything.
Right.
But then I'm wrecked for like a week.
For a week.
And so it was like this.
And then I'm just saying, oh, you're not fit.
And I'm
Let's
like,
go run again.
and I'm like, no, like I really feel horrible now.
Right, because your heart rate would be at like 180,
Oh, yeah. I was really, really high when I
running
first
like a
started.
12-minute mile.
Barely.
Right.
Like barely running.
Right.
Jogging.
And then in my mind at that time, I'm like, well, if you just run more, you'll get in better shape. Your heart rate
Yep.
will come down.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily true.
No, it was more of like, it took us figuring out like, okay, we have to do intervals or something else. But it's like, becomes a system where it's like this precarious balance.
Yeah. And so what have I done well? And what have I done poorly? And what could I have done differently? And what should I keep doing? That's like a
Yeah.
four-part question. But like, let's just start with, what have I done well? What am I doing well that I should keep doing that works for you?
I think what you have always done really well that has supported me is I think you're very good at being able to see when I'm afraid versus when I am like maxed out. I think you've really gotten that down in the last couple of years, where in the beginning, like you said, like it was, you couldn't tell, right? But I think now you'll catch stuff even before I do of like, hey, have you like had your electrolytes today? Or like, hey, you seem like this. Instead of hearing the words that I'm saying, you're like seeing me.
Yeah, because I remember, I spent so much time in the military. If you weren't breathing hard, I'd be like, you're not trying.
I remember you saying that. Yeah. You're like, you're not even sweating.
Yeah.
But we didn't know, like, I have an abnormal sweat response because of POTS. So, like, I don't sweat.
Yeah, so you're like not really breathing hard, not sweating, but your
Yeah.
heart rate's at 180.
Yep.
And so in the beginning, I'd be like,
Yeah.
you're just not trying.
Yep.
And then in the military, like, okay, you're sandbagging, like you're
Yeah.
faking it, whatever. And I'd get angry.
Yeah. You'd be like, do you know how many people I've ran with that sweated when they were tired?
They're like breathing hard, sweating, like you
Yeah.
can tell they're, and you're like, you're just stopping.
I'm like, but my heart rate is redlined.
Right.
And has been for a while.
Right.
I cannot breathe.
So I do that well now,
Yes.
but then I think I have my own answer, but I'm curious what your answer is. What do I not do well now that I could do better?
I think that I am not, I think it's a two-part. So when I say, hey, I'm not ready to do this, or I don't want to do this, or I think that you also push me because I used to quit so much.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't hear me say, I'm not ready,
Yeah, I hear you, but I don't listen
but you don't
because
listen.
I don't believe you.
Because sometimes you're right. And in
But
the past you were right often
but
because
that's
I
the
quit.
tricky part, right?
I know.
So like that's where the argument's gonna happen.
Yep. Yeah.
And so try to think of a time that we've done it well.
Yeah.
Like how did we work through that? I accept it,
Yep.
but then you be honest and push when you can.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think it's also on you, even
It
though you're the
is.
one with POTS. Like, hey, are you just being kind of lazy or are you having a heart rate issue?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too it was fear. So like I was so afraid to fall off that tightrope
Yeah.
that it held me back like for years because I was like, man, I don't want to get hurt, so I didn't try harder, meaning I didn't progress either.
But in my mind, if you try harder, you'll get in better shape and you'll do better next time. But for you, that would end in being laid out,
Maybe.
maybe.
And so then it's like I didn't even know. So at the same time, I think that that's where the communication comes in. And so I feel like that's what we've gotten really great at in the last couple of years is like hearing each other, like hearing what we're not saying when we're like when I'm frustrated or when something else, like you're recognizing how I'm feeling sometimes even before I am.
Yeah. I mean, I'm paying attention. And I think the the important part about this is like, if you're trying to get better, if you're using the SALT app, if you're seeing a doctor, if you're like working through symptoms, that communication has to be ongoing
All the time.
because it's not going to be the same. It's going to, that's going to move what you can and can't do, what's flaring, what's not, like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
like you might have a tight neck or tight jaw, but your heart rate's a little better.
Right.
And so that communication has to be like ongoing.
Ongoing. Yeah, even last week, like when we were biking, of like in the beginning, like I said something and you were like, oh, let's do it anyway. And then so I get frustrated. And then, but we stopped. We talked about it. And then like the rest of the ride was like completely clear communication. It's like,
Do you
hey, I'm
mean
gonna
the
stop
valley?
after the valley.
Yeah, we argued.
We did.
You
Yeah.
know, I was pissed.
Yeah.
And I like went down there, pushed your bike up,
You did.
complained that you just did the lever the other day.
And then I was actually mad that you were pushing my bike, even though I
Right.
didn't want to push it
Right.
because I wanted to push it, but
Yeah.
I didn't. I knew I shouldn't push it.
And even though we have been through all this and created the app, like
Yeah.
it's so easy to get there when you're being self-centered. When
Yeah.
you're just thinking about like what you expect,
Totally.
you know? And I think if people can keep that in mind, I know if I keep that in mind, you know, we have a better day, we have a better time, you progress,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and more of life's activities are open to us.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't have progressed without your pushing me when I was afraid
Pushing you the right way
in the right way
at the right time.
at the right time, which is tricky, right? But
Well-
that was what got me into like the first run that I did,
Right.
into moving like those intervals where I think when we figured out that like interval running was what would work,
Right.
and you were like 30 seconds, now walk, 30 seconds, now walk. And like those 30 seconds seemed like they took forever. But the encouragement in between was like so huge for me because I never would have done that by myself.
So the way we've supported each other with a chronic illness is actively communicating, expressing our frustrations, our expectations, our fears, or what we want out of life. But then realizing that that doesn't happen every day all the time.
Yeah.
But you got to give and take, give and take. And it's not just on me as your spouse, it's also on you, even though you're the one with POTS.
It is because I'm the one that knows how I feel. And if I wait until I get to the point where like I'm maxed out, whether it's physically, mentally, now I've got a headache, whatever, if I wait until that point and I haven't said anything before, I have no right to get angry with you. I should be communicating the whole time. And if when I do, it's like much smoother, much better. And then the growth that comes from that is so great.
So if you're in touch with your body, your symptoms, you know, what you've consumed, what you've ate, what's going on with your like the week, with your stress levels.
Yeah.
If you're in touch with all of that, you can communicate better. And then if I can be compassionate, empathetic for you and realize that it's a moving target, I can listen better.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of attitude has brought us through some pretty dark days.
Definitely.
And I think that attitude is opening up a lot of opportunities for us.
Yeah, I think so too. Absolutely, it has.